whole of the UK. So most places are going to be bright and dry on Wednesday, some cloud and a bit more of a breeze in the north of Scotland. But elsewhere, with that strong June sunshine, temperatures rising each day, peaking by the weekend into the low 30s.
Heavy showers first thing will be followed by a warm, cosy day. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Crash Law 24 sponsors GB News Traffic and Travel Report.
Good evening. This is the latest AI travel news from GBNews.com. Road users should exercise caution on the A9 Dornoch Bridge due to strong winds. In East Riding of Yorkshire, delays on the M6-2 westbound should resolve tonight. In Warrington, the M6 southbound has one lane closed due to a collision, causing delays. In Essex, a collision has closed all lanes on the M11 southbound entry slip at Junction 8, with resolution anticipated by 8:59. Planned maintenance has closed roads between Junction 47 and Junction 48, with diversions in place. And on the trains, major disruption is reported on the London Overground in the Gospel Oak area. For more travel news, go to gbnews.com.
Crash Law 24 sponsors GB News Traffic and Travel Report.
£54,321 cash could be yours. Cash that you could spend however you like. It's like having an extra £1,000 each week for a whole year to play with. Someone is guaranteed to win this amazing amount of cash, so make sure that someone could be you. For another chance to win £54,321 cash, text cash to 63225. One entry costs £2.50 plus one standard network rate message, or text bonus to 63225. 5 entries cost £5 plus one standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start at £2.50. Call 0903 686 3232. Calls cost £2.50 plus your network access charge. Or post your name and number to GB14 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 4 p.m. on the 1st of August. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand.
Westminster's full of talk, but out here, it's the real world. Am I allowed to talk now? No, that's it. This is where it matters, real people and real lives. That's what politics is all about.
The fact has Trump made a good start? No.
Straight answers, no spin, and just a couple of pints.
How many fingers have I got up?
About 10. So join me for Lee Anderson's Real World every Friday at 7 p.m, only on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
It's Patrick Christys tonight, and here we do things differently.
It's explaining the absolute madness of this, doesn't it?
It's explosive.
I mean, this is very good.
It's lively.
850. Your government sat there short and it did nothing.
It's controversial.
And the Middle East has been in turmoil since before I was born.
It's everything you need to kickstart your evening.
Everyone's had their Weetabix tonight. I love to see it.
That's Patrick Christys tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Very, very good evening to you and welcome to GB News Tonight with me, your host, Martin Daubney. And coming up on tonight's show, a major milestone in the grooming gang scandal as the Home Secretary, Yvette Cooper, has addressed at long last the findings of Baroness Casey's report into grooming gangs, declaring it as a deep-rooted failure to treat children as children. And the Home Secretary highlighted that there was a collective failure to tackle questions about grooming gangs' ethnicity and promised a full national judge-led inquiry. But is it all too little, too late? And also, coming up on tonight's show...
Immigration is the lifeblood of this country. It always has been.
The big question, where exactly does Reform UK stand on immigration? Their new chairman raised eyebrows by telling the press he thought immigration was the lifeblood of this nation. Does he stand by those comments? Well, I'll be joined in the studio by Dr. David Bull live in just a moment to put that precise question to him. And are we set for the Snoopers Charter 2.0? Well, civil servants are reportedly set to be given powers to monitor individuals' private bank accounts in what some have branded a dangerous threat to civil liberty. And tourism backlash is sweeping Spain, Italy and Portugal as locals, socialists armed with water pistols, protest the presence of British holidaymakers from Barcelona to Venice. Some say Brits abroad are a boost. Others are calling them a nuisance, a blight. Are the locals overreacting, or is mass tourism simply out of control? What was the show? Well, decades in the making. At last, today, the survivors of rape gangs across Britain have been given a glimmer of hope. A full, judge-led national inquiry with the power to compel people to turn up at court and face the music. Is it enough? Is it too little, too late? Or are we finally tackling Britain's shame rape gangs? Of course, I'll be joined by Charlie Peters, who's been driving this story throughout. Get in touch with your views. GBNews.com/your say is the way to do it. But first, let's get your headlines, and here's Tatiana Sanchez.
Martin, thank you very much. The top stories. The Home Secretary says the government will now make it a formal requirement for ethnicity and nationality data to be collected for all sexual abuse cases. It comes as a report into sexual abuse carried out by grooming gangs in England and Wales is released. Setting out next steps following Baroness Louise Casey's probe into grooming gangs, Ms Cooper told the Commons too many grooming cases have been dropped or downgraded from rape to lesser charges because a 13 to 15-year-old is perceived to have been in love with or had consented to sex with the perpetrator. Sir Keir Starmer's under increasing pressure to apologise after he U-turned over the weekend, previously resisting calls for a national inquiry. Yvette Cooper says these crimes are a stain on our society.
After I asked police forces in January to identify cases involving grooming and child sexual exploitation allegations that had been closed with no further action, more than 800 cases have now been identified for formal review, and I expect that figure to rise above 1,000 in the coming weeks. Let me be clear. Perpetrators of these vile crimes should be off our streets, behind bars, and paying the price for what they have done.
Conservative leader Kemi Badenoch has accused the Prime Minister of an extraordinary failure of leadership.
I think we knew this all along. This is what has been said by many people, not least of all myself, but especially the victims, the survivors of this scandal. And this is their victory right now. I want to pay tribute to so many of them who waived their anonymity and never stopped fighting because they talked about this and they were dismissed as dog whistling, jumping on a far-right bandwagon and all sorts of nonsense. And I'm glad that the Casey report has now exposed that we needed a full national inquiry all along.
And Sir Keir Starmer has urged British nationals in Israel to register their presence there as countries step up efforts to bring back stranded citizens. Britons already in the country now face difficulties getting home with the airspace closed due to the conflict with Iran. Israel's Iron Dome defence system was breached overnight as Iran launched renewed strikes with at least 8 people killed and nearly 300 injured. The Israeli Prime Minister says Israel has full aerial operational control over the Iranian capital, Tehran, following 4 days of strikes. Yesterday, Israeli strikes killed the chief of Iran's Armed Forces Intelligence Unit. Sir Keir Starmer says the focus of the G7 meetings this week will be on the de-escalation of the conflict.
Shared concern about the risk of escalation, obviously, shared concern about the nuclear programme of Iran, but absolutely a focus on how we de-escalate this, and that'll be a central focus as we go into the talks today, get that de-escalation. And of course, all of us are giving advice to our citizens, for British nationals in Israel.
And those are all of your GB News headlines for now.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Thank you, Tatiana. Excellent as ever. Now, history was made today. People will be hoping, because the Home Secretary, Yvette Cooper, has addressed the findings of Baroness Casey's report into grooming gangs, declaring it as a deep-rooted failure to treat children as children. And the Home Secretary highlighted that there was a collective failure to tackle questions about grooming gangs' ethnicity.
And on the key issues of ethnicity that I'd asked her to examine, she has found continued failure to gather proper, robust national data, despite concerns being raised going back very many years. In the local data that the audit examined from 3 police forces, they identify clear evidence of over-representation among suspects of Asian and Pakistani heritage men. And she refers to examples of organisations avoiding the topic altogether for fear of appearing racist or raising community tensions.
Now, bear in mind, just 5 months ago, the entire Labour Party refused that full national inquiry. So what happened? Well, what happened was there was a massive public backlash, and many believe they were dragged kicking and screaming into finally giving the survivors of rape gangs the justice they deserve. Well, fresh from a press briefing with Baroness Casey herself is our national reporter, Charlie Peters. Charlie, welcome to the show. We've been speaking throughout the day. Many people think that this is at long last coming reluctantly because they were dragged into it. But you've been with Baroness Casey in that briefing. Tell us what happened inside it.
Well, Baroness Casey said that the victims were at the centre of this 5-month rapid audit that she conducted. And she also said that while she started the process, she did not believe a national inquiry was necessary. But very quickly, there was a turning point. She's been on a bit of a personal journey here, Martin, because when she went to the Home Office, she asked about these local inquiries that they announced in January. Remember, there were 5, and they were going to get £5 million to do it. And she found out that only Oldham had been confirmed and no other areas had volunteered or requested an investigation. At that point, she said she realised something was awry and she was duly unimpressed with the situation. Baroness Casey has a reputation for plain speaking and excellent troubleshooting, and her reports, having read almost all of it already, it's nearly 200 pages long, but there's so much detail, it certainly reaffirms that reputation. She is very sharp about state failure, running in for many decades. This is a 5-month audit, but it comes after decades of failure, with survivors being let down. Well, earlier, just in the last half hour, I spoke with Baroness Louise Casey to ask her what she had uncovered.
So I think the main thing that I have found is that I think certainly I did an inspection into Rotherham in 2015, where the issue of grooming gangs and the failure both of the local authority, the police, to intervene effectively and to catch the perpetrators, because the people that do this stuff are criminals, remember, was not good enough. And I looked at the last, first definition of child sexual exploitation was 2009, government, and I've looked at that period of time and tried to make sense of what's going on. So even though the numbers of cases of what they call group-based child sexual exploitation, which is code for a very heinous crime, it may be small in number, but it's still pretty horrendous. In my view, we've got historic cases that we haven't, there may be victims out there that haven't had justice that I think we should double back and do something about. And there are current cases where I think the approach to dealing with grooming gangs is not sufficiently robust, and that essentially is what I found. So I think there are 2 big things I've asked for nationally. One is a national criminal investigation, and obviously when people are coming forward and reporting crime, and I think we need also, it's in the report, I've got a formula where I think we can go and try and find historic victims and see if they want justice.
In the country.
Well, I always think when something is difficult and you don't tell the truth, then essentially that creates anger and upset. And so I think just being really straight about it is the best thing to do. And in a way, I'm angry myself that for the last decade plus, we haven't collected this type of ethnicity data to say, is it or isn't it a national problem? And that then leads to people running amok with the fact they think there are cover-ups and this and that and the other. Some of those people aren't good people. in my view, and they are, determined to sow hate. Some of those people are people just wanting to know what is going on. I'm in the group which is I want to know what's going on, so if I can understand what they call in policing terms the threat, then you essentially can work out how to stop it. And I think one of the reasons I've gone for this tightening up of consent is because I want every woman now that at the age of 13, 14 and 15, if this happened to her, not to feel that it was her fault.
This is vindication for so many survivors, their families, the campaigners and all others who have supported them for so many years, because Baroness Casey is saying today that we haven't learned any of the serious lessons that need to be learned. She says that people have faffed around rather than engaging with this issue properly. People haven't told the truth. People haven't investigated this severely. And she also had some choice words for me about the behaviour of politicians. She said that people had been using severe and negative language, and that potentially had pushed survivors away from engaging with this issue. She hopes now that with her rapid audit and the setup of those 2 inquiries, a police national investigation, but also the sort of civil inquiries that should take place now, which she wants to take between 3 and 5 years, she hopes now that with both of those strands, survivors and their families will have the confidence to come forward, share information and get the justice that they so desperately deserve.
Charlie Peters, one of the astonishing and shameful facts to come out today was when Yvette Cooper said that only 37% of perpetrators even had their ethnicity recorded. That is shameful. And she said that part of the reason for that was something that you and I and anybody who's been following this without a political screening, if you like, all along, has said because the vast majority were Asian or Pakistani men, but people were afraid of being called racist. Charlie Peters, one thing that really struck me from that session with Baroness Casey, you told me she was asked by the press, oh, isn't this stoking up racial tension by telling the truth? Actually, I thought she answered excellently. She said it's stoking up racial tension by not telling the truth. We deserve to tell the truth because facts aren't racist.
That's right, Martin, and she said it does no honour or no service to the Pakistani or Muslim communities of this country, the majority of whom in polling organised by GBNews want a national inquiry, but also they want severe punishment not only for these grooming gang abusers, but also for those who covered up the crimes and were complicit in denying justice taking its natural course. And I should say some of the findings from an ethnicity perspective are quite stark in this rapid audit. Over 50% of the group-based CSE cases in Manchester are for Pakistani or Asian heritage men, and it's over 64%, I believe, in Rotherham, despite in that town just 4% of the population being from the Pakistani or Asian heritage community. That is a remarkable overrepresentation, an astonishing overrepresentation, Martin. But for so many years, people have avoided these facts. They've looked at the bigger picture and said, well, when you look at all cases of child abuse, actually white men are the majority. But when you really drill down to this specific form of child sexual exploitation through grooming gangs, through local areas in this manner, then you do find this overrepresentation. It's time finally now, Martin, and the government have been told to do this, to get to the bottom of why that is, to understand the ethnicity, the social, the religious and the cultural drivers that have led to that overrepresentation. Baroness Casey is quite right when she says that if we do not do that, if we do not pursue the truth and the truth does not fear investigation, then we're going to have a higher chance of civil unrest, not if we have the reality on the ground right across this country.
Charlie Peters, it's so refreshing to hear that at long last survivors have found an ally in Baroness Casey and, of course, in yourself with your phenomenal reporting. Charlie Peters, thank you very, very much for joining us on tonight's show. Well, for some reaction to that, I'm now joined in the studio by the Reform Party chairman, Dr. David Bull. Dr. Bull, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Pleasure to have your company. What's your reaction to the Casey report? Are you convinced that at long last survivors might see some light at the end of the tunnel?
Well, look, I mean, first of all, I'm really angry and upset for the victims of these horrendous crimes. And how dare those two main political parties take credit for what is actually finally happening? You know, at the end of the day, what we want to see done is justice, and we need a statutory inquiry where you compel witnesses to give evidence. And I think your point is absolutely valid, which is if you do not address this, if you do not record the ethnicity of these perpetrators, then actually, and if you don't actually have a proper statutory inquiry, that will fuel civil unrest. People in this country want to see justice, and how dare these young people suffer at the hands of these men, and there needs to be justice served and quickly. And that's the other point that Richard Tice made, actually, in the Commons today. He said, when is this report going to report back properly? And I hope it is very, very soon, and I hope the justice is swift.
OK, thank you for your take on that. Now then, Dr David, well, it's fair to say that you made some comments recently about immigration. Would have got a few people in the Reform Party and a few of your voters. It's ruffled their feathers. Let's play the clip of what you said about the joys of immigration.
The key for me about this is it's about integrating into this country. Immigration is the lifeblood of this country. It always has been. But also, if you come to this country, you have to adopt our culture, our systems, our values. And covering your face is a barrier to communication, because that is not the way to communicate. We need to rebuild communities, and you do that by talking to people.
So, Dr Bull, the Daily Telegraph were quick to pick up on this. They said Reform's new chairman has swallowed the migration lie, hook, line and sinker. Immigration has never been the lifeblood of our nation.
Come on. The whole thing was taken...
What's your actual position?
Well, it was taken completely out of context. I think it was a rather nuanced answer. The point I was trying to make was that we need to be in charge and in control of immigration in this country. There is no doubt that immigration is out of control in this country. And I mean, by that, actually, I mean both legal and illegal immigration. If you go from importing something like 900,000 people a year into this country, even if you go down to 475,000, this is legal people coming into this country. Where are the schools? Where are the hospitals? Where are the services? Where are the GPs? Where are the houses? That's one side of it. And then when you look at illegal migration, 15,000 so far this year. They cost 4.5 billion quid. You've got 38,000 sitting in asylum accommodation or temporary accommodation in this country. And when you look at the cost of that, that is the same as the City of Manchester's tax revenue and their national insurance. Nothing is being done about it, and people are absolutely furious.
You're right on that, and certainly Reform voters will be glad to hear this. But the fact of the matter remains, in 1951, immigrants made up 30,000 total of the entire population, 0.07% of the population. So the facts simply don't stand up. Is that still your position? That immigration has always been the lifeblood?
Well, what I meant by that was it was a much more nuanced answer. So, for example, many of us are actually immigrants a long time ago, whether you're a Huguenot, whether you came from wherever. And that was kind of what I was trying to say. The point that I'm now making, and just to be very clear on this, is both legal and illegal immigration are completely out of control. And let's look at why that is. Because, of course, we had this open border policy. We let anyone come to this country under Tony Blair, under Boris Johnson. And when you look that we have 925,000 kids between 18 and 25 who are not in education, employment or training, what we need to do is to put this country first. I want to see those young people in jobs, in training, in employment, and that is our priority.
So is your position now, then, that immigration hasn't?
It was a clumsy sentence, probably. But I was just trying to say that when you have controlled immigration, let's take the health service. If we don't have the specialist care and the physicians, for example, then we need to say, right, we are going to allocate this number of people to come into this country who are excellent in their specialties.
We could train British nurses.
Of course we could train people. But it will take time, Martin. That is part of the problem. And that was really what I was trying to get at. But yes, of course, I want British people to have predominance in jobs in this country.
Good. Let's look at what some of the Reform voting polling tells us. Because 84% of Reform voters, the highest of any party, probably no surprises to viewers or to yourself, support the deportation of violent criminals. What is the Reform Party's position on enforced repatriation, if you like? Because a lot of people think they would like to perhaps see a more Trumpian approach of deporting criminals, but that doesn't sit well with the same comment of immigration being the lifeblood of the nation.
Will you stop going back to that one comment that I made? No, look, the point is that actually in terms of our prison population, we don't have enough prison places. I also would like people who are violent offenders who are not from this country to be repatriated.
And also, Reform's policy seems to be, Nigel Farrell has said it, Zia Youssef has said, I think you have as well, to deport all illegal immigrants. Is that still the policy of the party? Because that could be more than 1 million people.
Well, let's go back just in terms of the people who've come here illegally. First of all, we can't do anything currently because we're in the ECHR, so we need to leave the ECHR. Also, there's far too much pull factor. So if you come here illegally on a boat, you're given a house, you're giving benefits. We found out today from Zia and the Doge group that actually we're paying your TV licence. What madness is this? The fact is, if you come here illegally, we need to make it very difficult for you, process you rapidly and deport you if you have no right to be in this country. If you come here illegally, you will not have the right to work, you cannot come back, and we will ensure that you are deported, and swiftly.
OK, Dr David Bill, thank you for joining us tonight and facing the music. Always a pleasure to have your company. Now, coming up next, more on today's grooming gangs announcements from the Home Secretary as politicians from across the board welcome the news. But questions have been raised about why this has taken so long. I'll be joined by a Conservative MP who's been campaigning in the Bradford area. Robbie Moore joins me next. With me, Martin Daubney on GB News Tonight.
Mornings don't have to be tiresome, especially if you have the right company.
Wake up to news as it happens, opinion and debate, and of course, a little bit of entertainment too.
Because when the kettle's on, we're on.
That's Breakfast on GB News, a show worth waking up for.
Every morning from 6 a.m.
Only on the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We'll spread the news, you spread the word.
GB News Breakfast, every day from 6 a.m.
What stresses you out the most?
Oh, stupid people. Yeah, stupid people. Actually, I'm convinced the world is full of stupid people.
Right, OK.
All right, so stupid people.
Why are you looking at me? Why are you looking at me?
No, I actually wouldn't look at you, mate. You're a smart person. But no, honestly, if you were in my life, particularly when you rely on people to do things for you and they just can't see the obvious thing to do.
Oh, no.
But you have to be very grateful that they are doing things for you.
Yeah, that's...
Ellie, for me, it depends on the mood I'm in. Because if little things happen and I'm not in the right mood, then everything drives me crazy.
Now, that is a very good point. So, micro stresses.
Is that what it is?
But according to the Daily Mail this morning, 89% of Britons are finding the small stresses is exhausting them the most.
Yeah.
Things like being stuck in traffic.
Yes.
Hate that. The bin bag breaking.
I actually don't mind being stuck in traffic.
No, I do. I find it... Oh,
That's OK.
Great on my soul.
Unless it's late, I'm late for something. Although I was stuck for about 3 hours trying to get home yesterday.
Oh, no.
Yeah,
but you see, I don't think those are micro stresses. I think they're major stresses.
Full-on stresses.
That's what the study says,
so listen, don't pass them off as, it's only just stuck in traffic. That's a major thing.
OK,
yeah.
that's major stress. OK.
Yeah.
It says sometimes it triggers the same exhaustion as a single major life event. If you have lots of these in a day. So bin bag breaking is you taking it out, losing your keys.
That's a major one.
Yeah.
That's major for me.
People who walk slowly, that is so irritating. Forgetting to charge your phone overnight, forgetting to put the bins out, not being able to find an outfit.
You know what I really hate? Really, really grinds my gears?
What?
Is when I either let someone out, and when I'm in the car, I let someone out and they don't say thanks, or I stop and let them cross over and they don't go...
That's irritating.
Then I go...
Well, I tend to agree with you, Paul.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Good Afternoon Britain isn't just about us. The wonderful thing about this programme is it's about everyone watching. It's an interactive programme.
Well, there absolutely is something to see here, and we're going to be talking about it more. Whether it's breaking royal news, please bring us up to date. Or indeed a particularly punchy speech in the House of Commons.
Very, very curious.
We bring it to you live, and then we bring you live reaction as well.
That's Good Afternoon Britain, weekdays from midday.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to GB News Tonight with me, Martin Daubney. Now, the conflicts between Israel and Iran has dominated the G7 in Canada as leaders are planning to issue a joint statement on the conflict in the Middle East as they meet in Canada. Now, earlier this afternoon, President Donald Trump had this to say on what he had heard from the Iranians.
I'd like to talk, but they should have done that before. I had 60 days and they had 60 days, and on the 61st day I said, we don't have a deal. They have to make a deal, and it's painful for both parties, but I'd say Iran is not winning this war.
Well, that was Donald Trump. Let's cross now to Chopper, our man in Canada, our political editor, Chris Hope. Chris, Mark Carney on the screen there, Donald Trump on the screen. They'd be forgiven for believing that Donald Trump was leading this. And once again, he's dominating all of the airwaves. And there's a lot of talk back here, Chris, about the fact the grooming gang inquiry is out. Sir Keir Starmer, once again, being never here, Keir, on his 25th foreign trip since becoming Prime Minister.
Yeah, that's right, Martin. Well, welcome back to the Rockies, the Canadian Rockies. It's lunchtime here. Already meetings are taking place. We're expecting Sir Keir Starmer to meet with Emmanuel Macron, discussing small boats, trade, and of course the Middle East, Israel, Iran. And we're also expecting Donald Trump to meet with the Prime Minister before long. So bringing you the updates as soon as we get them. Already we're hearing from the UK government. They're saying that Brits out in Israel must notify where they are. Obviously, the government says that's not ahead of some formal evacuation, but at least it allows the government to know where Brits are if the situation escalates anymore. Of course, the UK has deployed RAF Typhoons in the region. Again, question marks over how. Back in April and October last year, the UK stepped in to defend Israel from Iran. If that happens again, it does put the UK in line of fire from Iran's attacks. That's a concern too. So that is dominating the talk here at the G7. You say he's been away 25 times. I mean, in defence of the Prime Minister, he does want to get away and travel, and he's doing well, I think, on the world stage as he signs trade deals and agreements with India, US and the European Union. Whatever you think of those deals, he is trying to push Britain on the world stage. He also did a deal just yesterday with Canada to ensure that Canada won't the Pan-Pacific Trade Partnership that opens up access to $12 trillion of trade exit dividends. So he has to the number against any suggestion that he's over here to avoid scrutiny from the rape gang scandal we've been covering in such detail on GBNews. They're saying very clearly he's put himself up for interviews. He has looked at the evidence from Louis Casey and thinks there now should be a national inquiry. That's how the PM works. He looks at the evidence and then acts.
OK, thank you, Chris Hope there. And apologies for a slightly rocky signal there from the Rocky Mountains. Chris Hope, thank you very, very much. Now, returning now back to Baroness Casey's historic report into rape gangs released earlier today. And Baroness Casey has set out 12 recommendations in that report after she found that police were avoiding pursuing grooming gangs over fears of being called racist. Now, in the report, she writes the establishment have been in denial over the ethnicity of the grooming gangs. And I'm joined now by the Conservative MP Robbie Moore, who's with our man Charlie Peters. Robbie Moore, of course, is somebody who's campaigned tirelessly on this. Charlie, over to you.
That's right, Martin. Yeah, I'm very happy to say I'm joined now by Robbie here on College Green. And Robbie, this is an extraordinary result of what the Conservatives are saying, their own campaigning, but also for a lot of victims and survivors around the country.
Yeah, absolutely. This is a day for the victims and survivors that have been calling on this for a huge amount of time. And I have, as the Member of Parliament for Keighley within the Bradford district. So we are very pleased that finally the government have said that there's going to be a national inquiry. But we need to now get to the detail on that, because what I'm unsure of is that if there is still going to be a spotlight on the Bradford district that I've been advocating for consistently for a long period of time now.
And, Robbie, there is surely a sense of regret on Conservative benches that it's taken a Labour government to call for this national inquiry. The Conservatives might say that there was the ICSA report going on, but that concluded 3 years ago. There was time to do this before Labour came into power.
Well, look, I've always advocated that the ICSA recommendations should have actually been put in place in full from day one. It's frustrating that never actually happened, and it's frustrating that still we don't have the time frame associated with that from this Labour government. And yet we now have the national inquiry coming down the line. That has been announced today, but yet we still don't know if that's going to focus on the Bradford district as I've been advocating for. And what this also says is actually a really damning day for those leaders in West Yorkshire, the leader of Bradford Council, the West Yorkshire Mayor, who have consistently refused to get behind my campaign, and indeed yours, and indeed those of the many victims and survivors that have wanted that spotlight to be shone across Bradford district to make sure that this absolutely is investigated as robustly, as strongly as it can be, and that those perpetrators are properly held to account.
Bradford Council and the Mayor have always said that they have had some independent reviews, but obviously survivors in the town say that's insufficient and there's more to uncover. Robbie, we've also heard from Baroness Casey today saying that people have faffed around on this. Do you think that reflects what the Conservatives did in 14 years? Did you faff around when this issue was being raised?
Well, I feel that there's been a huge institutional failure across decades. I mean, crikey, it was Anne Cryer, who was my predecessor when she was the MP between 97 and 2010, was consistently raising this, and it was a Labour government at the time that refused to recognise what she was saying. And yes, there has been institutional failure. It has been the biggest national scandal, and yet here we are, only today, a national inquiry being launched, but yet we don't know what that is going to actually mean for places that have never had that spotlight shone on them, like Bradford District. And I will absolutely keep campaigning consistently until I understand what this government actually is going to be delivering and we actually get what the victims and the survivors have been advocating for since this issue has been raised.
Now, Baroness Casey said today that the moment that changed her opinion on this and the need for a national inquiry is when she found out that the 5 local inquiries announced in January, only Oldham was coming forward to call for that, and it wouldn't have statutory powers. Do you think that Labour ministers involved in that decision and those who suggested that this was a far-right issue should be considering their positions this evening?
Well, look, this is just so frustrating when the narrative at that point was changing away from what the real issue was, which was addressing those issues of the survivors and the victims. And it is incredibly frustrating that when the Home Secretary stood in the chamber back in January and announced that there was going to be these 5 local audits or local inquiries, that there was no statutory powers that are being awarded to them. Indeed, that there was this narrative that was given by the Prime Minister at the time that anyone that raised this was jumping on the far-right bandwagon. And that is completely wrong, because what that does is it degrades actually the concerns that are being raised by people like me, by people like those survivors and those victims, and indeed those wider families that have had to endure this level of heinous crime for far, far too long. And I do hope that those ministers that have gone down that narrative, indeed the Prime Minister, apologise for taking that stance and indeed roll back that rhetoric, because we're all raising valid concerns that need addressing.
Now, Baroness Casey today has called for 2 sorts of inquiries, a police national investigation, but also this sort of civilian, this sort of political inquiry, a national inquiry away from policing matters. What do you want that second inquiry to look at?
Well, what the Casey review didn't focus on is local authorities, or indeed those organisations beyond the police forces that had safeguarding responsibility. Now, I have always advocated and raised a huge level of concern around local authorities, indeed mine in the Bradford District, because you have a local authority there that had children's services stripped away from it under the last Conservative administration. So what I absolutely hope that as we see going forward, that this isn't just focusing on police forces, but it's focusing on local authorities. In fact, any organisation that has had safeguarding responsibilities, dare I say children's care homes, for example, and how those have been signed off by local authorities. So this needs to be wide-ranging, it needs to be done quickly, and it needs to be boots on the ground. There's no good at all if this is a national inquiry that's only focused here in Westminster. It needs to be out in the communities like Bradford and Keighley to get to grips with these issues. And finally, convictions must follow. And if it means that people lose their jobs, regardless of political colour, then so be it.
Robbie Moore, thank you very much for your time this evening. Well, there you go, Martin. That's the view of Robbie Moore, the Tory MP for Keighley and Ilkley. Arrests potentially going to follow from a national investigation, potentially more grooming gang abusers facing the sort of retribution that they otherwise would have avoided. But as you've just heard, a lot of politicians, a lot of survivors and campaigners, they don't just want the perpetrators to be looked at. They want the local authorities and the civil servants and police officers who failed them to also face a great degree of retribution.
Well, Charlie Peters, a lot of people watching the show will be wishing sleepless nights on anybody who's involved in this historic abuse, no matter where they work, social services, in politics, in the police, in councils. There should be a day of reckoning. Thank you for your excellent work today, as ever, Charlie Peters, and also thank you to Robbie Moore. Now, coming up next, are we set for the Snoopers Charter 2.0? Because civil servants are reportedly set to be sniffing around, giving powers to monitor individuals' private bank accounts in what some have branded a dangerous threat to civil liberties. What on earth they want to put their noses in our bank accounts for? That's next with me, Martin Daubney, on GB News Tonight.
Hello and welcome along to the latest update from the Met Office for GB News. Windy in the north overnight, particularly the far north of Scotland, with areas of cloud and some rain drifting south, although it will stall across central areas, leaving mostly fine conditions across southern parts of the UK because of this area of high pressure which is beginning to dominate. And that's going to extend countrywide later this week. But for the time being, we do have some weak weather fronts toppling in across the northern edge of that high, and those weather fronts have been bringing outbreaks of rain to central and northern Scotland through the day, the rain then sinking into southern Scotland and Northern Ireland overnight. Some heavy bursts associated with it and some strong winds in the far north. Further south, it's a calmer night with clear spells and some mist and fog to start the day across southern parts of England and the Midlands. Nevertheless, through Scotland, it's a cloudy start for many. Some brightness as the cloud breaks up to the east, but it's still a blustery picture across much of Scotland and Northern Ireland as we begin Tuesday with showery rain at times. The rain edging into Cumbria, northern parts of the Pennines, and an increase in the cloud coming along to parts of Wales, the north coast of Devon and Cornwall. But for much of East Wales, the Midlands, East Anglia and the south, it's a sunny start to Tuesday after any mist patches burn away. And then we keep those spells of sunshine into the afternoon, possibly a sunnier afternoon compared with Monday. But we do have this zone of cloud and rain that's tending to peter out through the day across central parts of the UK. Brighter skies to the north, feeling fresher. 26 Celsius, though, in the southeast. And those temperatures are going to climb day by day through the rest of the week as high pressure extends its influence across the whole of the UK. So most places are going to be bright and dry on Wednesday, some cloud and a bit more of a breeze in the north of Scotland. But elsewhere, with that strong June sunshine, temperatures rising each day, peaking by the weekend into the low 30s.
You want to know what's really going on in the corridors of power? Labour don't know what to do with you half the time, and that makes you quite lethal in the chamber. Get behind the headlines with Chopper's political podcast. Join me, Christopher Hope, as I sit down with the great and the good of British politics. We'll see where this ruling takes us. These are the stories shaping our nation. Chopper's political podcast, available now on all platforms. Listen in and stay ahead.
From the school run to the home run, watch a new show for all of Britain. He can say whatever he wants. A straight-talking show where all voices are heard.
And, you know, when are we going to stop talking about smashing the gangs and actually do it?
With the stories that matter from every part of our country. There's a bit of a crash landing there for your Chancellor. Bold, fearless and standing up for you. That's me, Martin Daubney, 3 p.m. till 6 p.m, weekdays, here only on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel. Welcome back to GB News Tonight with me, your host, Martin Daubney. Now, this evening at 9 p.m, as ever, the magnificent Patrick Christys tonight. And the star of that show joins me now, the formidable, the machine, Patrick. What's on your show?
Yes, well, loads on. I mean, we are clearly going to be touching on the Pakistani rape gang crisis that we're now allowed to talk about. Yeah, Emily Maitlis was way off the mark, wasn't she, when she was interviewing Rupert Lowe? So we're going to get stuck into all of that, ask what we have to do about it. There's also a report that's out that says that illegal immigration, people who have come to Britain illegally, are being investigated for grooming gang offences. So they've come to this country, they've broken in, they've been put up at the taxpayers' expense, and then they've gone about raping British girls, which I think really needs to stop. We're going to be talking about all of that. I'm also going to be having a head-to-head on abortion as well, because it looks as though some people want you to be allowed to have an abortion right up until the moment of birth, which I think is probably murder. And lone wolf attacks, finally, as well. So we are now looking at potentially bad faith actors from Iran who have lived here, worked here, etc., being essentially activated by the Iranian regime to do nasty things to us. So all of that and much more.
Patrick Christys tonight, always a meat-packed menu from 9 till 11. Always a pleasure. Thank you. Mate. Now back to GB News Tonight. Now, in a move branded a Snoopers Charter, new government plans could grant civil servants Civil servants, unprecedented powers to access the public's bank accounts without even to have to acquire a court order. Now, the proposed new fraud bill would allow mid-ranking officials to freeze your accounts, seize your funds, and even demand search warrants, bypassing, of course, the traditional police oversight. Now, critics warn this marks a dangerous shift, turning banks into state agents and threatening civil liberties. But, of course, ministers claim it's a necessary tool to fight fraud. Peers and privacy advocates fear a chilling erosion of personal freedom and accountability. Well, it's a great conversation. I'm joined now in the studio by the Legal and Policy Officer at Big Brother Watch, Jasleen Chagger. Jasleen, welcome to the studio. So, of course, they would say this is about clamping down on the bad guys that want to steal your money and wish the state and all of us harm. But isn't this just an intrusion into all of our lives because they can't catch the bad guys?
You're absolutely right. The government is giving itself extraordinary powers to directly deduct money from bank accounts where people owe it money, not just for fraud, but also for error, without any court oversight. And these are officials in Whitehall who will be doing these checks, going behind people's backs, asking their banks to hand over 3 months' worth of bank statements to decide whether to deduct that money. And that's just the tip of the iceberg, because there are also mass surveillance powers in this bill, which would require banks to scan every single one of our bank accounts to determine if there is an indication of a fraud, overpayment or an error, even the government's own error. And so it's completely disproportionate.
Now, Jasleen, the authorities, the state, the civil service themselves, the government would no doubt say, well, what have you got to fear? If you've got nothing to hide, why have you got a problem with us looking at your financial activities?
We have a tradition in this country of the presumption of innocence, and that means that you shouldn't be subjected to surveillance unless you're suspected of wrongdoing. And this really turns that presumption on its head, because it's saying we're all suspects by default unless your bank says that you're not. So it's a really worrying precedent that's being set there. Technology
is infiltrating our lives everywhere in terms of how we're monitored, how we're followed. Is there a pattern emerging here, do you believe, of, for example, with COVID passports, we saw Tony Blair once again resurrecting his plan to make us all being monitored with a potential threat to our civil liberties. We recently heard another plan to give all British citizens ID cards because we can't control our borders. Are we being nudged into gradually accepting that one day we just have to face facts, we'll have to surrender and admit that we will all be monitored digitally in the future?
It does seem like we're on a slippery slope, and we should ask ourselves before it gets too far what we're willing to tolerate and which rights and freedoms we're willing to give up. When there is an infringement on our privacy, it should be where it's necessary and proportionate, and not just because it makes the government makes it easier for the government to administer their own problems.
Now, Jasleen, when I drive around London now, I see, to be honest, most days sort of mobile CCTV vans parked on streets in London, scanning the faces of criminals or potential criminals to try and catch bad guys. Some might say that's a necessary price we must pay. We should all be scanned to track down potential terrorists, rapists and serious criminals. But do you worry that that, again, means that all of us must be captured?
We're all being dragged into this net of both financial surveillance and physical surveillance. You're right that facial recognition cameras are on the streets of Britain and even being put into CCTV cameras. And we have to ask about the chilling effect that that can have on our freedom of association, freedom of expression and our privacy rights as well.
But a lot of people might think, do you know what, it's now getting so bad, you know, we literally don't know if we have jihadists walking among us. We don't know if people are coming over the channel, escaping, fleeing, you know, the Ayatollah's regime in Iran who wish to cause us harm. So are we at that tipping point? Proponents of recognition, facial recognition of IDs, we might say, do you know what? I'm afraid we all do have to surrender our rights, because if it's the best chance of catching serious criminals who wish us harm, that's a price I'm afraid we have to pay.
Well, one of the questions with all these new technologies that the government wants to rely on to solve these administrative problems is whether they actually work. And by the government's own estimations, the bank spying measure will only recover 1.4% of fraud and error annually in this country. And we have to ask, is it worth giving up all of our rights and having this trawling net, making the banks an arm of the state in order to get back just a small fraction of that money?
Tony Blair's name always comes up on this channel during these conversations, and I have to say, it's never usually a good thing. What's his game?
I'm not sure. Tony Blair has been calling for digital ID cards both, back in the early 2000s, and now again this digital ID card, we're seeing it resurface. Back in the early 2000s, the No to ID the No to ID campaign defeated those proposals, and we're fighting again. We have a petition for the government to drop the plans to have a Brit card, which would force all of us to prove our identity and have all our engagements with the state tracked and monitored. And we don't want to turn Britain into a Papers, Please society.
A lot of people say this is a gradual erosion to the point where we could be monitored and restricted in the future, as we saw during COVID lockdowns, astonishing scenes where you couldn't go to church or the pub or to a library without being a human barcode. Is that the way we're going, or is that just a conspiracy theory?
I hope not. Funnily enough, China is introducing laws to cut back on facial recognition, whilst we're rolling it out on our own streets. And so we need to have a serious consideration about whether that's the way we want to go.
Fabulous stuff. Thanks for joining us. And that's Jasleen Chagger, who's the lead and policy officer at Big Brother Watch. Now, a DWP spokesman, that's the Department of Work and Pensions, told GB News this: it is right that we modernise our approach to catching fraudsters and identifying overpayments at the earliest stage. And all the powers in the bill are underpinned by a principle of fairness and proportionality and do not involve mass surveillance of people's bank accounts. Now, coming up next, a huge tourism backlash is sweeping Spain, Italy and Portugal as locals armed with water pistols protest the presence of British holidays from Barcelona to Venice. Some say Brits abroad are a boost, others a nuisance, but are they completely overreacting? This shower of foreign socialists. That's next.
Dinner under the stars tonight?
That reminds me of our travel insurance.
You mean all clear skies?
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations Forecast.
If you're jetting off to the Mediterranean this week, there will be plenty of fine conditions, quite widespread sunshine out towards Greece and the Aegean. A few showers to watch out for in places. They may develop into thunderstorms, but they're being driven because the temperatures are really set to soar. Particularly across Iberia, we could see a heat wave developing with inland areas, seeing temperatures close towards 40 degrees Celsius by midweek, and that heat will transfer to France later on.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations Forecast.
Join me, Nana Akwe, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, he didn't say that, Dave.
I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good Afternoon Britain isn't just about us. The wonderful thing about this programme is it's about everyone watching. It's an interactive programme.
Well, there absolutely is something to see here, and we're going to be talking about it more. Whether it's breaking royal news, please bring us up to date, or indeed a particularly punchy speech in the House of Commons.
Very, very curious.
We bring it to you live, and then we bring you live reaction as well.
That's Good Afternoon Britain, weekdays from midday.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Mornings don't have to be tiresome, especially if you have the right company.
Wake up to news as it happens, opinion and debate, and of course, a little bit of entertainment too.
Because when the kettle's on, we're on.
That's Breakfast on GB News, a show worth waking up for.
Every morning from 6 a.m.
Only on the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We'll spread the news, you spread the word.
From the school run to the home run, watch a new show for all of Britain.
He can say whatever he wants.
A straight-talking show where all voices are heard.
And, you know, when are we going to stop talking about smashing the gangs and actually do it?
With the stories that matter from every part of our country.
There's a bit of a crash landing there for your Chancellor.
Bold, fearless and standing up for you. That's me, Martin Daubney, 3 p.m. till 6 p.m, weekdays, here only on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Westminster's full of talk, but out here, it's the real world. Am I allowed to talk then? No, that's it. This is where it matters, real people and real lives. That's what politics is all about.
The fact that Trump made a good start, no.
Straight answers, no spin, and just a couple of pints. How many fingers have I ever got up? About 10. So join me for Lee Anderson's Real World every Friday at 7 p.m, only on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Westminster, the ultimate clique. And you're fighting like rats in a sack. But here on the Camilla Tominey Show, we ask the questions the establishment media is too scared to ask. OK, let me ask you a straight question, because I know you're a straight-talking politician. Whether it's net zero, illegal immigration or law and order, nothing is off-limits. You had the power then.
Yeah, as I
and
say,
now you've lost it. That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show that's fearless. But no, let me finish my question if you don't mind, because it is my show. Sundays at 9:30, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back now. Protests are erupting across Spain, Italy and Portugal as locals demand a crackdown on mass tourism. In Barcelona, demonstrators armed with water pistols are targeting holidaymakers frustrated by soaring rents, overcrowding and the loss of local culture. From Lisbon to Venice, locals claim tourism is pricing residents out and turning cities into playgrounds for outsiders. But others argue that Brits abroad provide massive economic boosts. Of course they do, and we should be welcomed away there. Now then, are Brits unwelcome or are they a nuisance? Well, joining me now is a travel journalist, Simon Calder, who's never a nuisance when he travels abroad. Simon, welcome to the show. Here's the point. They might not like tourists, but they bring in a heck of a lot of dosh. 187 billion euros, in fact, per year in Spain.
Oh, yes, Spain, absolutely our top holiday destination. I was there just last week. It was absolutely beautiful. I was extremely welcomed. I was well looked after. But yeah, if I'd been sitting in Palma in a cafe yesterday, I could well have been squirted with a water pistol as part of the Southern Europe Against Tourification protests, which have been, as you say, going from Palma to Barcelona to Lisbon, also protests in places like Genoa and in Venice. And the whole idea is that even though, exactly as you say, tourism is the closest that any country can get to free money, there are limits, and people in many of those destinations just think, well, we've got enough tourists, we've got to think of a different plan, and we'd frankly like lots of people to go away and stop bothering us.
Yeah, and Simon Calder, the fact of the matter is they're saying tourism is incompatible to life. Tourism is 13% of Spain's GDP. Perhaps they should blast the water pistol in their own ears.
Oh, sure, yeah. Look, and I'll tell you who they want. They want you very much to be there in November, going to places like Extremadura, where they don't get any tourists, and spending lots of money. Every country in the world wants better behaved tourists who are spending a lot, spending plenty of time there and going to visit the less popular places. Now, the thing is, I think these are a little bit kind of self-fulfilling because, Barcelona is ridiculously crowded.
Simon, we have to go there and we'll blast you away with a water pistol because I'm joined in the studio by a perfect gentleman abroad, Sir Jacob Rees-Mogg. What's up next?
What's up next? Well, we're going to be talking about grooming gangs. We have to. This is such a terrible scandal, and it's a scandal that multiculturalism is involved with, that people wanted to pretend everything was fine. They didn't want to admit to the racial element of it. I'm going to be discussing this with Katie Lamb. I think it is a fundamental point for today, and the Casey report is so important in opening up what has actually happened.
That's next with Sir Jacob Rees-Mogg, State of the Nation. Superb as ever. I'll see you tomorrow, 3 till 6 p.m. Up next, State of the Nation. First, though, here is your weather forecast.
will be a light breeze in the morning, leading to a warm front. Boxed heat pumps, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello and welcome along to the latest update from the Met Office for GB News. Windy in the north overnight, particularly the far north of Scotland, with areas of cloud and some rain drifting south, although it will stall across central areas, leaving mostly fine conditions across southern parts of the UK because of this area of high pressure which is beginning to dominate. And that's going to extend countrywide later this week. But for the time being, we do have some weak weather fronts toppling in across the northern edge of that high, and those weather fronts have been bringing outbreaks of rain to central and northern Scotland through the day. The rain then sinking into southern Scotland and Northern Ireland overnight. Some heavy bursts associated with it and some strong winds in the far north. Further south, it's a calmer night with clear spells and some mist and fog to start the day across southern parts of England and the Midlands. Nevertheless, through Scotland, it's a cloudy start for many. Some brightness as the cloud breaks up to the east, but it's still a blustery picture across much of Scotland and Northern Ireland as we begin Tuesday with showery rain at times. The rain edging into Cumbria, northern parts of the Pennines, and an increase in the cloud coming along to parts of Wales, the north coast of Devon and Cornwall. But for much of East Wales, the Midlands, East Anglia and the south, it's a sunny start to Tuesday after any mist patches burn away. And then we keep those spells of sunshine into the afternoon, possibly a sunnier afternoon compared with Monday. But we do have this zone of cloud and rain that's tending to peter out through the day across central parts of the UK. Brighter skies to the north, feeling fresher. 26 Celsius, though, in the southeast. And those temperatures are going to climb day by day through the rest of the week as high pressure extends its influence across the whole of the UK. So most places are going to be bright and dry on Wednesday, some cloud and a bit more of a breeze in the north of Scotland. But elsewhere, with that strong June sunshine, temperatures rising each day, peaking by the weekend into the low 30s.
Expect a warm front, moving from the kitchen right through to the rest of the house. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Imagine having an extra £1,000 to spend each week for an entire year. £54,321 in tax-free cash could be yours. Cash to spend however you like. £54,321 in cash could be landing in your bank account this year. For another chance to win £54,321 cash, text cash to 63225. One entry costs £2.50 plus one standard network rate message. Or text bonus to 63225. 5 entries cost £5 plus one standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start at £2.50. Call 0903 686 3232. Calls cost £2.50 plus your network access charge. Or post your name and number to GB14 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 4 p.m. on the 1st of August. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand.
Mornings don't have to be tiresome, especially if you have the right company.
Wake up to news as it happens, opinion and debate, and of course, a little bit of entertainment too.
Because when the kettle's on, we're on.
That's Breakfast on GB News, a show worth waking up for.
Every morning from 6 a.m.
Only on the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We'll spread the news, you spread the word.
From the school run to the home run, watch a new show for all of Britain.
So he can say whatever he wants.
A straight talking show where all voices are heard.
And, you know, when are we going to stop talking about smashing the gangs and actually do it?
With the stories that matter from every part of our country.
There's a bit of a crash landing there for your Chancellor.
Bold, fearless and standing up for you. That's me, Martin Daubney, 3 p.m. till 6 p.m. weekdays, here only on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Westminster's full of talk, but out here, it's the real world.
Am I allowed to talk then?
No, that's it. This is where it matters, real people and real lives. That's what politics is all about.
The fact that Trump made a good start, no.
Straight answers, no spin, and just a couple of pints.
How many fingers have I ever got up?
About 10. So join me for Lee Anderson's Real World every Friday at 7 p.m. only on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.